Kevin was 30 years old when he met Claire, a single mom with an adorable 2-year-old daughter. Kevin always wanted kids of his own, but for some reason it just never happened. Fortunately for Kevin, the dad was not in the picture at all. He had no interest in being a father and took off shortly after Claire got pregnant. Hey, it wasn't his fault. The young pretty girls always want the bad boys, but they don't want the boys being bad. Tough luck. It wasn't long before Kevin was head over heels in love with Claire. She was, after all, quite pretty and still had an amazing figure. He was becoming quickly attached to the 2-year-old Evelyn as well. He might not have been the bio dad, but he was the dad who stepped up. After all, any man can make a child, but it takes a father to raise a child. Kevin was more than willing to do whatever it took to be the best father ever. Claire was a busy woman between 2 jobs and tons of friends. She rarely had time to be a girlfriend or mom. That didn't bother Kevin that much. He was delighted to take Evelyn everywhere with him. To the parks, the swimming pools, the beaches, the playgrounds, amusement parks, you name it, Kevin and Evelyn had been there. They were inseparable. Not only did Kevin love his new daughter, but it was also obvious how much Evelyn loved her new dad. It was Kevin who read her stories and tucked her in every night. It was Kevin who took her to daycare and picked her up every day. And it was Kevin who taught her how to catch a ball and ride a bike and even swim. There was nothing Kevin wouldn't do for Evelyn. Without any doubt, it was a beautiful story of a man who truly stepped up and became a dad to a young girl who desperately needed a father. Evelyn was 5 when her mom's affair started. Claire's manager had had the hots for her for quite some time, but it took a while to make things happen. Kevin was devastated the morning she came home with a neck full of hickeys. She insisted it was a skin condition, but Kevin wasn't an idiot. Claire finally relented and told him that her and Chad from work had been fooling around for a few months now. Kevin was crushed. For over 3 years, Kevin and Evelyn had been inseparable, joined at the hip. Although he knew his relationship with Claire was over, he begged and pleaded to be allowed to stay a part of Evelyn's life. Kevin now realized that he may never have kids of his own, and he had invested over 3 years of love and time and attention into this relationship with Evelyn. Fortunately, Claire felt sorry for Kevin and agreed that he could continue seeing her daughter. Kevin was all too willing to let Claire have everything, including the house and their mutual savings. He only cared about staying in Evelyn's life. It wasn't long before Claire rented out the house and moved into Chad's place. With Evelyn, of course. Chad already had 2 kids with his ex and saw them every other weekend. Chad wasn't really that into kids, even his own, but he was willing to put up with another one because Claire was definitely hot and all too willing to please. It only took a few more months before Chad started questioning why Kevin had to come by the house to pick up and drop off Evelyn. After all, he wasn't even the real dad. He had no rights. If Evelyn was going to have a stepdad, it would be Chad, not Kevin. At first, Claire protested. Chad just didn't get it. Her daughter really loved Kevin, but Chad had a way of eventually getting his way, and it wasn't long before Kevin was being told that Chad didn't want him coming around the house anymore, or trying to be a dad to Evelyn. Kevin, of course, was heartbroken. He did everything he could to try to convince Claire to change her mind, but with no success. Claire was now in the Chad-pleasing business. Kevin could disappear and die somewhere for all she cared. 5 years later, Kevin ran into Claire, Chad, and Evelyn at the mall. Evelyn smiled shyly, but knew her mom and dad wouldn't approve of anything more. A few awkward words were exchanged and all went on their way. Kevin walked away with tears in his eyes. He had done nothing wrong. He had done the best he could. And as he walked away, he wondered if he would ever see Evelyn again.